Welcome to Hot and Heavy. Yeah. I did not want to hurt my guest ears this time because he's a repeat guest on this airwaves. We've been doing this the last 2 years on the Hard and Heavy airwaves. I would like to welcome back Mark Grondin from the channel Spectrum Pulse, YouTube channel Spectrum Pulse. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing very well. For those who are not familiar with your YouTube channel, give us a brief synopsis of what you do on your YouTube channel.
Sure. I'm the host of Spectrum Pulse, where I talk about music, movies, art, and culture, predominantly album reviews, although occasionally some of them are both long form and they get into more interesting digressions about art and culture. I also have a subsidiary channel called Billboard Breakdown, where I go into the regular inanities and insanities that happen on the Billboard Hot 100. And believe me, there was a lot of mess that over there this year, although not quite as crazy as last year. I will say that.
Oh yeah, we got into all those insanities last year, so but there were some insanities this year. But first question, right off the bat, Mark, how would you describe the year of 2022? I messed up the first question for popular music.
In a word, more complicated than I think some people will make it out to be. Because I've had a lot of conversations around this in terms of, yeah, it's a really good year, or yeah, it's not really good at all. But I think entirely it depends on how you are seeing this year. Because the one thing I immediately will come to realize that this was a year where there was a lot of pretty credibly sized albums, but they were not albums that I found all that easy to discuss. There's sort of material that comes when an artist has a lot of time to sit and brood and really think over certain pieces. So you can tell that a lot of them are a little bit overmanaged with certain exceptions. Now, part of that comes off of that is you're also going to have artists and acts who sometimes get in their own head too much, and that can lead to some rather disastrous results. But on the other hand, I also think if you want to talk about this year, you kind of have to break it out in terms of genre, especially in popular music. I'd argue that hip hop has not had a particularly strong year in terms of the mainstream. The underground had a blast. I think rock as a whole, kind of a nightmare. We'll get into that later on.
Yeah, it was a nightmare.
But I'd also say that mainstream pop was kind of hit and miss. Whereas on the flip side, if you were listening to R&B, I think R&B had a pretty solid year. And if you go into a genre like country, I'll be straight out and say this. Mainstream country in 2022, this is one of the best years this genre has had, arguably since the 90s. It's a little bit striking just not how much material was just outright exceptional in both the mainstream, but also the independent sphere as well. And if you weren't paying attention to the great music there, you were missing out.
Yeah, you talk about the depth in the country scene and depth in the R&B scene. What should be watched in 2023?
Tough to say, because again, like it all depends on what is going to be coming. I don't think unless rock institutes some pretty seismic, fundamental, ground level changes, I'm not sure we're going to see a lot of changes there. I'm going to be fascinated to see what happens when it comes to the next couple major releases in pop specifically. I think we've gotten a slew of hip hop as of the past couple of years. I think pop is looking to slightly reassert itself and take more dominance, at least fight back more credibly. In terms of overall Hot 100 dominance, I think it would be a mistake to forget reggaeton as well, which, especially with Bad Bunny's success this year, you can't overlook it at all. So I can't make a lot of predictions, but this year and going forward, there are some promising signs.
And I thought Bad Bunny brought a different sort of tone to the reggaeton. He brought different sounds, and different sort of tunes to the reggaeton of the year that was 2022. I thought that album in particular had different sounds to it.
Well, yeah, he got a little bit more experimental. Of the two projects he dropped in 2020, I think those were more consistent overall. But he's now achieved a level of mainstream permutation that he's able to flex his more experimental side. So you get more oddball pivots, and he's bringing a lot of his peers in along for the ride. Rosalia had already had a pretty strong groundswell in her own right, but Motomami did a lot of good work. I wish singles off of that project had become better than and actually broken through instead of Despecha, but what can you do? I also think there's a lot of, at this particular point, reggaeton is at a bit of a crossroads where it can spread into a number of different directions. And you're starting to see some artists like Raul Alejandro who are doing some interesting things there.
And also, you can't forget the genre of Afrobeats, which has come up like a force this year as well.
I think the seeds of that were planted last year, and we're starting to see a little bit more of that play out. Actually, let me step back. You could argue the Afrobeat seeds were planted as far back as 2016, and it's just been a long, slow process of artists getting more crossover. I think it's only going to continue. Unfortunately, you can argue that certain American audiences will see it as a bit of a novelty, or they rely upon American artists for that crossover. You saw some of that both last year and this year. But at the same time, I think there's more credibility that's being given to Afrobeat artists that they already had in Africa, but now it's crossing over more definitively. On the flip side, you're also seeing this for K-pop as well, where a bunch of them are realizing, wait a minute, we don't really have to dumb down all of our sound to go and play for the American pop audience. And I'll give the members of BTS credit. When they actually managed to split out and do a lot of solo work this year, I liked a surprising amount of it.
Yeah, it was like J-Hope actually had like a rap rock record that sounded pretty good.
Yeah. And then you have RN who stepped up, and he's a bit more of like an R&B, kind of a bit of a J-rock tone that came with his sound. Well, more J-pop. He's crossing over into a lot of those tones that came out of the Japanese scene, but also bringing upon a lot of the influences that he had in American R&B. So Erykah Badu's on that album, Anderson .Paak's on that album. That's actually a pretty surprising breadth that comes with their sound that really implies that the labels do not have to pigeonhole them in making the most boring pop imaginable.
Oh, I agree. And they can be experimental with their sounds, which is a win-win for audiences and the record labels. But with Heat Waves being the year-end number one and the cycles of the songs on the Hot 100 becoming longer term as it becomes their most popular tracks, does Billboard need to change the timing of their songs onto when it's becoming recurrent?
See, the thing with Billboard is I'm actually entirely okay with the 20-week recurrent cycle when it comes to those within the top 50 and 52 weeks when it comes to the top 25. I'm actually okay with that because the majority of songs will not persist in that range. The problem is that, and I'm sorry for speaking ill on radio here, but there is a lot within mainstream pop radio which have locked into a specific, we have a song that's working and focus tested, we're just going to hammer it into the ground as much as we possibly can. There's a lack of rotating out of singles, or actually, let me actually streamline this further. It's a list of songs that has gotten increasingly narrow in terms of these are what works in this little silo, and we can't possibly add any more into it. And I think outside of Nashville country radio, which has a slightly larger breadth that they are at least allowing in recent years, I think it's a mistake. I think that ultimately Billboard is a reflection of what gets played. As long as streaming has its pretty constant turnover, the long-term stabilizing effects, they come on the radio. Yeah. And that really has to be where there needs to be more evolution. And in my opinion, less reliance on explicit, these are focus tested callouts, and take a few more risks.
Yeah, I agree on that one. Do you see hope in like the album bomb system?
No. That's going to continue happening because of the way how songs are promoted, especially on streaming, where the entire album gets added to streaming. Oftentimes, the entire album gets added to playlists, and customers will just go out and listen to the entire project, often on repeat, especially when you have larger influxes of stan culture who are incentivized to listen to the entire project and drive all those consecutive streams up. And I want to stress this is not just in pop either. You see a lot of this in hip hop. You see some of it in R&B. It's going to be fascinating to see what sort of album bomb SZA gets off of her new project, SOS. So really, even country's starting to get in on it with Luke Combs and Morgan Wallen, hate to say it. So really, the genres that are not getting on board with streaming in the same way, they're kind of being left behind.
Oh, I wholesomely agree with that one. And another recurrency rule question, as we all love those. Songs that are, say, older than 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ones that people talk about the most, like Running Up That Hill and All I Want for Christmas Is You and Mary on a Cross, for instance. Should they be getting these chart positions over newer songs? Or what do you think should happen to them as a week-to-week follower of the charts?
I think the conversation about new songs coming in or older songs that are coming back that potentially can muscle them out, I think it's kind of fascinating because it breaks down in a couple of different ways. The whole conversation about Running Up That Hill going viral, it's kind of unique because it got that breakthrough on Stranger Things. And then it went viral on streaming, and then it got a radio push. It was about as much of a fluke hit as we otherwise get, and a hit across multiple channels. Whereas a lot of older songs that go viral, they often go viral on TikTok, and they will last for a certain chunk of time, often at the expense of older song or newer songs in the artist's catalog. Take a look at Die For You by The Weeknd going viral instead of anything off of Dawn FM. And it leads to a distinctive bit of frustration for some of the artists involved. But in all due fairness, I'm kind of okay with the older songs crashing back in. This is not new when it comes to how the Hot 100 is operated. Go back to the 70s, for instance, where you'd have older songs get reissued and they'd get another run on the sales charts. You saw this in the 90s as well, where songs, simply because of how the sales timing of when the actual single copy was released, you'd have a song have a long radio run, and then based upon a single release, that's when they crash onto the charts at a certain time.
So radio medleys.
Exactly. You also had that. There's been a lot of ways of manipulating the charts as a whole. I'm not really against them. They're just new evolutions for the time. And honestly, I'm kind of okay with some older songs coming back if we're getting Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush, which is a classic, or those brief moments when Master of Puppets came back. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was freaking awesome. Or Mary on a Cross by Ghost. That
a little less awesome on that one, but we'll get to that. I think where my frustration comes is with the holiday music. I get what it's doing. I think Billboard is actually being kind of shrewd with this, and that they're letting the holiday songs fill out their recent recurrency rules. And as they get within, you're within the 20-week barrier, well, you're not getting back in outside of the top 25. Oh, you've passed the top 25? Well, screw it. It's the holidays. We're going to let it happen. I think All I Want for Christmas Is You is going to come back every year. It's kind of a factor of that. And if I want to change there, it comes on year-end lists. I don't think the holiday songs really belong there, especially the older ones. I'm like, it's cute, but it looks weird. And I feel like, especially as the year-end lists are often to commemorate the most important and vital songs of the year, tacking on holiday classics, it feels weird.
It's not All I Want for Christmas Is You is like the 55th most important song of 2022.
Which it's not. No, it's not.
So, just for example, there. I don't know what position it was, but.
Well, you're going to aggravate the Mariah stands, so please be careful.
Oh, I know. They're going to be coming after me. Oh, no. With the Ticketmaster turmoil being the talk of the industry at the current moment, what do you think could be done to circumvent these insane ticket prices and the monopoly known as Ticketmaster?
Okay, I think there's two important things to point out because this is actually pretty straightforward. Number one, Pearl Jam was right about 25 years ago. if not 30 years ago, when they were starting to rail against Ticketmaster coming around versus in Vitology. I mean, Ticketmaster has always had issues when it comes to upcharging and monopolistic behavior. The good news, and if you pardon me from dancing a little bit near politics right now, the current president's actually has appointed some people who have anti-monopolistic like leanings on their side. So if there's an opportunity to just break up Ticketmaster or at least separate them out from Live Nation, this would be the time to do it. Actually force their hand and break up the monopoly. That's kind of it's the simple way, it's a simple answer to this, but that's kind of what needs to happen. And honestly, should have happened decades ago.
Yep. And hopefully it does happen, because I'm tired of these shows just going up, 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 up.
Well, it's frustrating because you can tell artists want to actually go on tour and ensure everyone actually gets a fair shot at the tickets. The problem is that when you have a lot of scalpers who are allowed in, or resellers who are botted one way or the other to get in ahead of everyone and then resell tickets and jack up the prices to an obscene length, that's arguably the problem there that Ticketmaster has surreptitiously been allowing for years now.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about rock music.
Oh boy,
over here. Oh god. Power talk on this one. Had a couple small wins in 2022, but big L's.
Yep,
all around. Ghost entering the Hot 100 was one of those wins, but on a weaker song.
Yep.
But overall, the genre is in a stagnant place. This has been a theme of the last couple conversations we've been having with rock producers and bands being over reliant on radio formats and not catching on the streaming platforms. What can rock do to survive becoming a popular genre in 2028? They're never going to be number one again, but
nope.
But what can they do?
I'm gonna spin this in a different way. And this is I don't think this is a question that is specifically about the industry, because the industry has no interest in changing. Like, as much as we as listeners to rock music want to be able to say, yeah, it'd be cool that rock would get more radio play or a bunch of rock bands would hop on streaming, especially as, and this is coming off of last year as well, there's clearly a young audience that wants to make rock, wants to listen to rock, wants to get engaged in that scene, but they're not achieving any tangible radio breakthrough outside of maybe the alternative charts. So the question that I ultimately have to ask is that, okay, if the radio, especially the mainstream rock charts, are so beholden to the old stalwarts who have been around 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and then you ask the question that a lot of these songs still get high call-out scores. A lot of these bands and artists are so well connected that ultimately rock radio wants to support their greats. And when the large-scale audience seems to be fine with that, I'm asking the question is, okay, if you've accepted that, you just have to come to grips with the fact that rock is not going to be popular, not to the same degree, or not even to a tangible degree. Like, the big comparison I can make is country, because country realized in, I want to say, the mid-2000s, or mid-2000s, mid-2010s, that they had to get on board with streaming. Otherwise, the genre would fall off. And arguably, I think it's been the best thing that's happened to them, because they've not only seen a breadth of people who are going towards the pop country crossover, but they're also seeing the people who are like, yeah, we like this neo-traditional stuff. Or, hey, this independent stuff that's totally outside of Music Row is actually successful. The biggest story of this year that's not being talked about by the majority of people is Zach Bryan, because he's an indie country singer-songwriter. He's not on a major. And what he was able to do with American Heartbreak and Summertime Blues in terms of getting not just the streaming success, but the live show success and the sellouts there has been nothing short of astounding. And he's done it without the label architecture and predominantly through streaming. Something in the Orange being as big of a hit as it was this year, it was a streaming hit. It wasn't because Nashville radio got behind it. I wish that rock artists in the modern era embraced that approach. because the old guard's not going to do it. The audience doesn't seem to care to want that variety. So if an artist has to get out there somewhere, I think that's how you do it.
Yeah, that's my hope right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm wearing a Tool shirt.
But
like,
Tool's not going to do that. That's the thing. You're
Tool's
talking
not
about
going to do that. Tool's not going to do that. That's the irony of it all.
Well, and I want to stress this. Tool has no incentive to do that because Tool is in a situation where they can ship songs to radio and they'll be just fine. If Tool was being forced to compete with everything else coming out of coming out of the new set of rock bands and punk and metal, where they were actually trying to shift and change the sound, if Tool was actually forced to compete, it would be a very different story. But that's the thing. Like, a lot of mainstream rock is not forced to compete with anyone because they've got their seats at the table already.
Yeah, and the newer bands, it's just like, and then you see the lineups of these festivals, and they look the same, and it's just like.
But it's gonna be the same. And here's the other thing with rock: it's not just the A-listers who are being dragged around and have those seats at the tables. It's the B-listers, the C-listers, the ones that nobody seems to care about that much, but they've got the names at the table all together consistently. It's one reason why I know I'm an exception to the rule with this. I didn't mind when Machine Gun Kelly broke through in 2020. He didn't pay it off in 2022. We'll talk about that. But at the same time, I at least respected the ability to break through a little bit more and start a conversation within rock. And like What You Want, it got a lot of kids interested. It got people in the door. And then I think
the When We Were Young Fest.
Yeah.
A lot of sold.
Well, and that's the thing. It got enough people in the door, and I don't think rock was very accommodating to them when they were there. If you're going to gatekeep that audience, you're going to get a smaller audience as they get older and they stop spending as much money.
Right. Rock fans love to gatekeep.
Yep.
What surprised you in popular music in 2022? Was it the lack of new projects, all the album bombs and shakeups? What raised your eyebrows in popular music?
I gotta be honest, it's very hard for things to surprise me. I'll be honest, I was shocked Taylor Swift dropped an album this year. I thought that she was going to take a pretty long break. I said that after the end of Evermore, but that woman is a workaholic, given that she put out the re-recordings of Fearless and Red in 2021 and dropped her another chart-destroying album this year with Midnights. She's got plans for the next round of re-recordings to drop next year. Like, I'll give her credit for a lot of work, and she's certainly active. Another surprise, Drake dropped 2 albums. I knew he was dropping at least one. I wish he had just stuck with the house album with Honestly Nevermind. I don't think that album is that good when it comes to house music, but it was different. It showed Drake actually willing to experiment and, again, bring in new sounds across house and even Afrobeat in portions with some of the producers he brought in. The fact that he then immediately followed it up with Her Loss because he had to placate a bunch of rap and R&B fans, like, what is this house nonsense? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, congratulations, you made Drake revert back to making his worst project to date. And I stand by that. Her Loss is Drake's worst album.
Yeah. If he refined the house sound, it would have been better, honestly.
You know what? I have been waiting for Drake to actually make a pure R&B project or work with some of the legends in that genre for years now. And he can do it. That's the thing that drives me nuts about a lot of this. This is a man with an unlimited budget and is widely hailed as one of the biggest acts working right now. If he wanted to get certain people into the studio, he could. So I don't know why a lot of this sounds so stale. And then you point back to, oh, wait, the audience seems to want it. And when he tried experimenting, a whole chunk of his loudest fans seemed to reject it en masse.
Yep, exactly. Because people don't like change.
And I get it. But at the same time, I think artists, especially if you're going to be at that tier and you're not evolving or changing, I'm going to stop being interested. And that's kind of been a shame.
Yeah. What were some of your most surprising albums in a positive and negative way?
Surprising albums. I actually got a list here that pulled that together. New FKA Twigs album from earlier this year, Capra Songs, kind of a bit of a mixtape. She really surprised me by going more of an accessible sound. Really loved how that R&B project turned out. Going down the list here, Frank Turner came back with FTHC.
Yeah.
That was, I did not expect him to go pure as hardcore as he did.
Best Frank record in years.
Yes, I think it's probably his. I can argue it's his third best album. And it's not better than Love Iron Song, but there are songs on this project that are a direct sequel of that shocked me so much. I was thrilled to see that. Huge surprise for me was Gang of Youths, Angel in Real Time.
Oh, yes.
This was the year I got into Gang of Youths, and wow, they are so up my alley. And phenomenal project, absolutely deserving of way more attention. This is a band from out of Australia, and this is a band I think is primed to have done well on mainstream rock because they play in the U2 lane. U2 is such an easy crossover band, and we're especially coming out of the 80s and 90s. The fact that mainstream rock just ignored that blows my mind.
Yeah, it blew my mind too. I was like, oh my God, this is so good, but people are ignoring it on both lanes.
Yeah, in terms of though of some disappointments, Impera by Ghost.
Oh, this is where we disagree, my friend.
I can imagine so, but I did a long review of this with one of my buddies, Crash Thompson, and I am sorry. I think the writing went downhill. I think the production took a very steep decline. To me, it felt like there was moments where that album was trying to do something interesting, and they just didn't work. Like, I'll admit that it's fine that Ghost is playing for more accessibility, but when the hooks aren't as strong as anything off of Prequel and Meliora,
I don't think it's their best. I don't think it's their best. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But still, I think it's an 8 out of 10. Prequel and Meliora are a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I can't go that high for me. To me, there just wasn't enough that I would seriously go back to.
Yeah.
That was a real disappointment when it comes to that side of rock. Speaking of disappointments, I know it's probably just me thinking this. I thought Mainstream Sellout was by Machine Gun Kelly. That didn't work at all. But here's the thing.
No, it didn't work. It didn't work. It was like the only song that really worked was the one with Ollie on it.
Yeah. The problem with that is you could very clearly tell that album is rushed. They were trying to capitalize on his very fleeting star power because his label has as little respect for him as everyone else. So of course you're going to get a slapdash project where he sounds like shit. The melodies sound recycled, and it's just not any good. I was extremely disappointed, and I think the album is often better than it's given credit because a lot of people are calling the worst of the year. It's not.
No, not by far.
But at the same time, I think it's also a very compromised album, and that's kind of what puts it into an awkward category for me. Swinging back to the positives, though, I'm just looking through the list here of the albums that
we're going to go through the list as well. So
okay, new Florence and the Machine album. That was a big surprise. She's working with Jack Antonoff, who I don't think is the best fit for her sound, but that album's probably the most accessible she has ever been, and it was a lot of fun. Similar note for Everything. They're a progressive rock band that's out of the UK. They really came to prominence in 2015 with the album Get to Heaven. Their album this year, a Raw Data Field, fantastic, more of a poppy dance vibe, but also they kept a lot of melodic intricacy. Excellent album, often deserves way more credit than it has gotten. What else? I'm trying to stick predominantly in rock just so we have more common ground here. The new Metric album, I think, is getting slept on by a lot of people.
Metric,
Formentera. It goes for more of like a synth punk vibe, and Metric's always been smart as hell. They're not seeing a lot of crossover outside of Canada, but I really loved what they did with that.
Have you heard the Chat Pile album?
The Chat Pile? I heard it. I reviewed it. I like it. I don't love it. To me, it feels very much like something I've heard before. It feels like it. I don't think the hooks are incredibly strong. I think it's solid for what it is.
Very solid, very solid. I thought not album of the year worthy. It didn't blow me away, but I
Yeah.
thought I thought for an album to really put your name on the map, it really put their name on the map for me.
I would agree. Another album that actually surprised me in a good way, Demi Lovato coming with
Oh
their
yeah,
album. They finally made the rock. They finally made the pop rock album, and it's not
good.
well produced, but there's enough good songs from them that I was really impressed.
Yeah, they really did a good job
Mhm.
on the album.
On the flip side, Panic at the Disco with Brendan
Yeah,
Urie basically decided to. That album is terrible. I'm
yeah,
not going to mince any words here. It's produced like ass. The drums sound terrible. The content is annoying as all hell. And when it comes to this sort of glam rock vibe, it's not working. Brendan Urie cannot sell it. He doesn't sound good on the album.
oh,
If it's the death knell of this band, it couldn't have come sooner enough. As much as I've heard that the album is made so he can get out of the contract, yeah, but you could have done more with it.
yeah. He has a lot more talent than that album showed.
I mean, you'd hope so, but at the same time, it's tough to gauge with Brendan Urie because at the same time, he's burned so many bridges that
Yeah,
he's not getting the best people to work with him either.
yeah. So I have a couple albums that we can talk about here
Sure.
that you didn't mention.
All right.
I'm gonna go with this one first. Porcupine Tree. Closure continuation.
Ooh, okay. I actually reviewed this in a two-part series with notes reviews. Check out their YouTube channel; it's actually really good.
Yeah.
The first part is when we went through Porcupine Tree's entire catalog. In terms
Oh
of where
yeah, that
that
was
was a
fun.
lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. I gotta be honest, I haven't gone back much to closure continuation. There are songs I like from it, but I feel like it picks up some elements I don't think hold up as strongly.
No.
It's got a persistent downbeat vibe that I was not feeling this year.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit of a downer.
Yep.
And normally in Porcupine Tree sort of has that light on the end of the tunnel vibe.
Mhm.
And I saw them live this year.
Yeah.
They were incredible, by the way.
I've heard they're great live, so that's
Um,
reassuring.
yeah, they are great, and they played most. Yeah, the album sounded great when I saw it live. They played most of the stuff from the album. They played a lot of stuff from their career. They played Anesthetize in
Ooh,
full.
wow.
They it was a 3-hour set, dude. It was incredible.
That doesn't surprise me. They are the kind of band that could consistently fill out a 3-hour set.
Oh yeah, and Steven Wilson is just like a conductor, like behind. But probably my favorite Porcupine Tree album, and I only heard the stuff from the 2000s, is Light Bulb.
Oh yeah, to me, Light Bulb is the clear top entry from that band. Now, granted, it's one of those albums I think leans more on the progressive rock side than the metal, but ultimately I think that works. I think it's a good synergy of where they hit their peak. But I understand why a lot of folks would probably prefer In Absentia, so makes sense.
Yeah. I just discovered them this year, and I saw them, and it was a wild ride with me and Porcupine Tree this year.
I believe it. Yeah.
So I had to get that one in there.
Uh-huh.
The Wet Leg album.
Oh, I thought that was crap.
You actually thought that was crap? Oh,
yeah, I did. I reviewed it back earlier in this year. I thought it was one of the most massively overhyped albums that came out, especially out of the UK. This is a band that I would not have given a second glance if they didn't have connections. And when I covered it, I thought it was the most faux ironic nonsense that you got out of the indie scene in the 90s and 2000s. I just had no patience for it. It wasn't nearly as smart or emotionally evocative as I thought it was. And I didn't think it was well produced either. It was the sort of project that I'm like, oh, okay, you're going to get a couple commercials off of Chez Lounge, but I have no desire to ever hear that again. I did
Yeah,
not like it.
I sort of felt it was good, but the Chase Launch feel. Big Thief, Dragon, New Warm, Mountain, I Believe You.
I really wish I could get into Big Thief. I've been trying for the past couple of years now. Everyone highlights that the songs are so striking on this album, and the production is so pretty, and that the writing is so all-encompassing. But I'm also sitting back here and I'm like, this is a prime example of a bunch of people who don't listen to country music in any variety. And also a bunch of these songs, I'm like, these are country tunes. I've heard these before, and I've heard them done better. So when you have a lot of people who will go to Big Thief as their only dip into this genre or subgenre,
Right.
it annoys the hell out of me. I think the album is okay. It's honestly pretty good. I think it's bloated as hell, but I'm not as enraptured. I'm not as mesmerized with this band as a lot of people are.
Fontaine's DC, Skinty Fia, I think it's called.
Skintifia. I wish people would find more interesting post-punk than Fontaine's DC. They're good for what they are. They make make an interesting retro sound. But again, if you've moved past the late 70s and early 80s, they're not going to be as interesting to you.
Right. Black Country New Road, Ants from Up There.
Ants from Up There is. Here's the thing. I have been sitting on this album. I've reviewed it. I thought it was pretty great. I think that it's an album that is going to age in weird ways, especially with Isaac Brock leaving the band. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, there are some phenomenal hooks. The best songs on this album, you can argue, are among the best songs of this year. But at the same time, like, Black Country New Road seems like it was never built to last. If you read into the subtext of the album, you can very clearly tell that it was on the implosion route as it is. I think Ants from Up There is getting a little bit of that benefit of the doubt because they are a band that, well, lost their frontman, and their frontman had a lot of staying power and creative control over where the band was going to go. I think if they last into another album, the sound is going to be completely different. So it's tough for me to gauge.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to gauge. I still think what they did was phenomenal. Soul Glow, Diaspora Problems.
Diaspora Problems is great. It is hardcore with a really aggressive blend that comes into like a bit of hip hop as well.
Yeah. Philly band, by the way.
Oh, I bet they're insane live, and I bet they would be a lot of fun to go see them. The content, if you dig into the content, I've got niggling issues with them. Yeah. And I really wish that they were a little bit more tuneful at points, but that's where the hardcore side of me kind of still aren't meshing as strongly as I would prefer. But Diaspora Problems ends so well that I put it still in the greatness category. It's probably going to make my year-end list.
Yeah. The Weeknd, Dawn FM.
That album deserved better. I don't think The Weeknd was expecting to face as much of a chart competition with Gunna as he wound up getting.
Wow, yeah.
Which I feel bad for The Weeknd because, again, Dawn FM, I also think I feel bad for The Weeknd because he was clearly ready to put out new music. But so many of the songs from After Hours were still persisting on the charts that dropping a whole set of new songs that I'll admit they're not as immediate. They're not as in your face. They're a bit more of a slow burn jam. I think the fans will ultimately come around and say, wait, this was great. Why weren't we more on board with this? Whereas I think the mainstream audience they got bored of it.
Dropped the ball.
But I'd also say one thing, like, this is also a very big difference where having the Canadian side of this, as I am Canadian, versus the American side is very different. Because The Weeknd had multiple hits from Dawn FM up here. Like Sacrifice was a hit. Out of Time was a hit.
Oh, that might have helped.
Yeah. Well, it helped me. It helped Canada. But at the same time, like, it's taking care of your own, but also it's the sort of project where I think with a little bit more room to breathe, it did do better than I think a lot of people expected.
Taylor Swift, Midnight. I originally was made on this album, a lot of people were. And what sort of was looking into the lyrics. And it's her most, I'm gonna say, insightful lyrics today.
I think she finally started writing songs like an adult.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why I put it as her best album since Speak Now. If not, I could credibly argue this is probably her best album. I'm not I go back and forth on that on a day by day basis, but it feels adult. The production I think is getting way too much hate. I think for as much as people crap on some of her lyrics as being overly adolescent or precious or kind of cringy, I think a lot of audiences don't want to acknowledge that even as adults they are just as cringy and they don't
Right.
want to themselves. And I think the album is remarkably candid and honest with just how flawed of a person she is. And even if it's all artifice, and I think to some level it is, it's really good artifice.
I think it is really good artifice, and I think it's insightful of her to sort of go into that place.
I agree.
Did you have the chance to hear Pain Remains by Warner Shore?
I did not know, unfortunately.
This is probably my album of the year right now.
Really?
And
what's the sound
I
like?
normally don't like deathcore. This is the thing. I normally do not like deathcore. The production on this is jaw-dropping. And then the symphonic swells just draw you in, and then Will Ramos' performance on the record just sells you on everything, especially on the Pain Remains trilogy. That trilogy really hits home, and probably my album of the year right now. It's either that or Gang of Youth right now.
That's tough. I'm not a deathcore fan at all, so I will take your word for it there. But that is intriguing. I'll see if I can give it a listen before the end of the year.
I'm not a deathcore fan either. That's like really, I think that's the highest praise. Right.
Did you hear the Actor Observer album this year?
No.
They're a Boston post-hardcore band. I had a patron of mine who was really huge into them. They gave me the album. It's what was the name of it? Hold on. I'm just going to look that up because I want to quote it right. Songs for the Newly Reclusive. It's only like 8 songs, but I think it runs under a half hour. Some of the best post-hardcore I've heard in a long time. Very La Dispute.
Yeah, that sounds up my alley.
Yep.
Speaking of bands I saw this year, Zeal and Ardor.
Oh, I didn't care for that. Here's the thing: I've been on the record before as not being a Zeal and Ardor fan for lots of reasons, and I've seen them live before. They're good for what they are. I thought the new album, it felt very much like a pivot towards more accessibility, and that's not where I think Zeal and Ardor is at their best. And I also don't think they're lyricists, so. Yeah, I just wasn't impressed.
JID, Forever Story.
One of the best hip-hop albums of the year by a credible margin. I can argue it's the best thing that Dreamville Records as a whole has ever put out. That includes everything J. Cole has ever made. I think JID has lapped and well gotten ahead of him there. It's driving me a little insane that mainstream critics are not on board with that album the way they should be. Because that album was goddamn phenomenal, and it's a little infuriating that I'm seeing like there's even enough elements on this album that are wide ranging and varied in their sound that critics should be all over this, and they're not, and it's driving me nuts.
The new Denzel Curry, Melt My Eyes, See Your Future.
This is an album that should have gotten all the hype that Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers got. I think this album is better. I also think I think it's probably Denzel Curry's most mature album. It's easily his most tuneful. I think it balances out the bangers with really smart bars and great hooks really effectively. It's an incredibly easy album to listen to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
And again, I think it's Denzel Curry's best. I also think it's one of the best hip-hop albums of the year. It's going to be slept on. And that also drives me off the wall.
And I thought Kendrick's album was really hard to listen to.
I'm not going to say it was hard to listen to. I think the argument I will say with Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is that it's wanting to have a lot of complicated conversations, but it doesn't want to
Yes.
see the natural extension of where those conversations ultimately end up leading. And I think the fans and the critics did that album a disservice by putting it on a pedestal, because that's exactly what Kendrick said he didn't want you to do.
Right. And it's not on. It's in the top 10 for me, but not really high for me because I think what he did was good, but I'm not putting it on pedestal because that's not what Kendrick would want from me.
Well, I'm not even going to say that. I don't think it's nearly as good as anything else he's put out. I could
Right.
credibly argue it's his worst album. But also, and this is where I feel I have to step in and say this, hip hop has had a great year if you go into the
Yes.
underground. Billy Woods put out 2 excellent albums this year.
Over Mike Eagle.
Billy Woods, I will not say is for everybody. His stuff is very dense and wordy. It's the sort of thing where there's another critic who online, his name is Professor Sky on YouTube. Please go check him out. He's excellent. Where he basically did, I want to say, an hour-plus breakdown of one of the albums he put out this year.
Oh, wow.
And he's coming from like an art history background in terms of all the layered references. And it's kind of that type of hip-hop.
Oh.
So, but also, while we're in this territory, I just want to rattle off a couple of names here.
Rattle off the hip-hop. Go on.
Pusha T's It's Almost Dry. Not
I
better.
was actually going to mention that. Yep.
It's excellent. It's not better than Darkest Until Dawn. It's not better than Daytona, at least for me. I think in the aftermath of Kanye's downfall in the latter half of 2022, some of the moments that he's on It's Almost Dry are less excusable, in my opinion. So I think the album is not going to age great, but at the same time, it's also the album that was on my weightlifting playlist all year, so I'm not going to complain that much. Going from there, Lupe Fiasco's album, Drill Music in Zion. The guy recorded it in 72 hours. It is easily some of his most accessible work in years. I think it's getting slept on by way too many people. Please check it out. It's excellent. Joey Badass came back with 2000.
Yeah, I checked that out.
Another album I think got slept on. I think it really works for me because Joey Badass in his more melodic, chill mold is exactly the kind of hip hop I really am a sucker for. While I'm on that topic, there's an artist called Red Veil with the album Learn to Swim. Very super chill, very melodic hip hop. It's really rough around the edges, kind of lo-fi in patches, but it's so relaxing. He's got such a phenomenal command of melody, and I'm really happy that I got to it this year. Great project. While we're on the topic of super jazzy stuff, super stuff that's more chill and melodic, Rap Ferreira dropped 5 to the Eye with Stars this year. It is like 20 minutes long. It's jazz rap. It's wordy. But it's really clever, and I really loved it. So much fun. One more hip hop album I want to shout out here. Open Mike Eagle, Component System.
Open Mike Eagle.
Component System with the Auto Reverse. I do not think it's his best. I think it's not. He had such a run in the 2010s with Dark Comedy, Hella Personal Film Festival, Brick Body Kids Still Daydream, and Anime Trauma and Divorce. This is more fragmented, more fractured. It's a bit of a tougher listen. It's also very obviously a pandemic record where you can tell that a lot of this was recorded while in some form of lockdown. And I think it's not going to age the best as a result. At the same time, it's an Open Mike Eagle album. So it's so intensely relatable. It's so down to earth, and it's so funny that I can't help but not recommend it in spades.
Yeah, Open Mike Eagle is one of the best rappers out there today.
And he's so slept on. Like, it drives me nuts. Like, this is the sort of artist I think should have been huge beyond his cult fan base in the 2010s. And it never broke through the way it should have. And that drives me nuts.
Backwash. His happiness shall come first, even though we are suffering.
It's a great album. I will defend the album as being pretty damn great. It's aggressive. It's a lot thornier. It's a dense album in my opinion. And I think that makes it a little tougher for me to revisit in comparison with her album last year. I Lie Here Buried with My Rings and My Dresses. But but again, if you're doing trap metal and industrial, she's the best in the industry at it.
Yeah.
So deserves all the credit in the world.
I know. I don't think you've heard this one, but I just wanted to give Tala a shout out for the Generation Danger. Tala is a new metal. The genre is new metalcore. So actually, this is Max Portnoy's band.
Okay.
So, and the singer is insane. The singer is really good. I think he's really talented, and the band playing behind him, the drumming's really good. You know that it's a Portnoy.
Yep.
And like, they're just bringing back that energy with a modern twist. The album's called The Generation of Danger, so
interesting.
I highly recommend that.
If I might throw out a couple metal recommendations myself here.
Yes.
This is, keep in mind that a lot of the metal I like is more on the metal side, so I've got a couple of suggestions here. Don't worry, I'm staying away from the fashy stuff, so this is the stuff that's a little bit more less political in the ugly way. So few recommendations. Falls of Rhoros. This is progressive black metal. The album's called Key Disappearing Future. It's dense, it's cold, it's vicious stuff. I've been a fan of this band since I saw them live back in 2019. I think it's a phenomenal project. Again, it is kind of dense, but it's more on the progressive side, and I think they do really well with it. Following in that wake of also a band I saw in 2019, Sayor, with their album Origins. It's more on the folk metal side. I will say it's not quite better than their projects they put out in 2016 and 2019, but I do think it's tremendously fun in terms of that soaring, a little bit cheesy folk metal side of things, especially with the black metal like edge to it. It's really effective. Building off of that, here's one that I think is kind of interesting. It's an artist called Sidon. The album is called Onryo 2, Her Spirit Eternal. This is black metal fused with J-rock. So the guitar work is nuts. It's really thrashy. There's really a lot of like rapid tempo changes. It's very visceral, extremely graphic in terms of the lyrics. So content warning is there, but I was really impressed by it. Staying in black metal, this is a Canadian duo. The group is called Vital Spirit, and the album's called Still as the Night, Cold as the Wind. It's more traditional black metal, but I really like the historical context because it's all about the wars of the Apache Indians in the American Southwest. And it takes a framing device with a historical storytelling that I think is really fascinating. It's a really good album. And finally, because I'm totally cheesy, the new Avantasia supergroup, they dropped an album called A Paranormal Evening with the Moonflower Society. If you like symphonic metal, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
It's goofy as hell, but man, it's funny. They got Floor Jansen on it. They got Jeff Tate on it. They've got Jorn Landis on it. Because again, like Tobias Sammet's got the ability to pull on so many people in that scene. They really are the symphonic metal brand of Arion. And Avantasia, the album is so hooky. It's so easy to go back to. I can't recommend it highly enough.
We're going to go to country with Ian No, River Fools and Mountain Saints, and Nadim the Artist's White Trash Revelry.
Okay, River Fools, Mountain Saints, it's not better than Between the Country, which was Ian No's breakthrough in 2019, but Ian No is such a magnetic presence as an artist that a lot of his writing is just so like homespun and charming that it's very easy for me to revisit and to recommend. Nadim the Artist is absolutely wonderful. They're an artist that I discovered on Bandcamp, and they broke through last year with the album Cast Iron Pansexual, which is a great title.
That's a fantastic title.
White Trash Revelry comes after they got signed to 30 Tigers, and they got more distribution. They were actually able to get vinyl pressed. And White Trash Revelry is serving as a lot of their breakthrough, and it's easy to see why. It's a lot more set to be played for a live audience. The tunes and the melodies are so striking, so bouncy on that album, but it's also, I will say, a little bit more politically challenging, especially if you're not more on the left. It could tug at some tugging some little sensitive areas. And that's one reason I like it, because it is so thoughtful and level-handed when it comes to addressing that. It wants to see the humanity in everyone, and I think that they are really smart at delivering that.
And then we have the Grammy nominations.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know. I only did selected ones because I don't have time for all that crap.
Yep.
We don't have time for all that crap. So, record of the year.
Okay. Looking at this category here, the tricky thing with record of the year is that a lot of this becomes very political, and it will be framed for a large number of people as Adele versus Beyonce.
Yep.
And that's Break My Soul versus Easy on Me. I personally like Easy on Me a little more because Break My Soul, I'm really tired of using that Robin S. Show Me Love sample. I just think it's overused, and I'm just not as drawn to it. I would be very interested to see if Steve Lacy wins for Bad Habit, because Bad Habit is just it's grown on me. I didn't love it, and I still don't, but it has grown on me a little bit. The Heart Part 5 was just a moment that I think works so well, but I think Kendrick will be up for other awards there. The only other song I think is competitive might be Harry Styles, As It Was.
Yeah.
And that's just because As It Was so damn huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Those were the four I was thinking. The five I was thinking too.
Yeah.
The Heart Part 5 too, because that was such a cool moment with him using the Marvin Gaye sample. That was better than anything on the album per se.
I disagree. I think Rich Spirit and We Cry Together are better moments on the album. And I'm one of the few people who actually will re-listen to We Cry Together. Mostly because the Florence and the Machine sample is inspired, and also that Mr. Morale and Big Steppers dropped the same day as Dance Fever, which I think is just hilarious.
That is hilarious, actually.
So, but now let's get to the albums in particular for album of the year. Again, I think it's going to be a toss-up between 30 by Adele and Renaissance by Beyonce. I'm not really a huge fan of either album.
No.
Honestly, in this category, it's not going to go to Brandi Carlile in These Silent Days, but it is the best album here. By a considerable margin. I think it's getting slept on by a lot of people, but Brandi Carlile is an industry favorite, so I'm not surprised she got nominated. Other than that,
I wouldn't be shocked if she won. They always throw a left field one out of there.
Yeah, but Brandi Carlile is industry enough that I can't see her getting the left field pick. If they would do that, they would go for Voyage by ABBA, because ABBA hasn't really won the Grammy yet.
Yeah. Song of the year.
Oh god, this is even worse.
This is worse. This is a lot worse because we have DJ Khaled and Gail here.
Here's the thing. I'm going to stick up for Gail. I think I've heard and reviewed both of her EPs this year. I think people who got sick of the overexposure of A, B, C, D, E, F, U, I get it. You're in radio. I totally get it. But at the same time, I think that Gail is a smarter songwriter and has better production instincts than many of her peers will give her credit. Apparently, she's excellent live. And like, she's actually working this tour circuit and trying to build like a baseline audience, and it's kind of working. Her second EP in particular has some really raw, really incisive moments that I do not think are given enough credit. That being said, ABCDEFU should not be nominated for Song of the Year.
No.
Again, it's a toss-up between Easy on Me and Break My Soul. Some people will say God Did should win just off the Jay-Z verse. I vehemently disagree. But then you also have Taylor Swift with All Too Well.
Taylor there, so Taylor could always win.
This is the one where I think Taylor could win with All Too Well. I don't think the 10-minute version is as good as the original. I also don't think that there's also a version of the song that Rustin Kelly made and covered that is the regular All Too Well. That's actually really, really good. And he actually put it on an EP, I want to say back in 2019. It's called Dirt Emo. But anyway, I think the version of All Too Well is probably, that's the other third party competitor there.
Best New Artist. This is something.
You know what? I'm not against some of these picks. Like, Like if I'm looking at this list, like
I'm
Domi
not
and
against Monoscan. I'm not against that.
Muskin's not going to win, unfortunately. I think they had their moment in 2021. It just feels a little late for them. If there's anyone who I think the person I think who should win it are Domi and JD Beck. I think they did some really interesting things on their album this year. Money Long's been in the industry for years. She shouldn't win. Omar Apollo, similar sort of thing. Honestly, if there's an award where it's probably going to go to Lotto based on her industry connections, but it's also kind of the kiss of death because I kind of don't want to hear any more music from her. So,
yeah.
Oh well.
Best pop solo performance.
Again, I think this is easy on me's award to lose, but About Damn Time could go for it. Bad Habit could go for it. As It Was could go for it. I sadly think that Bad Bunny's going to wind up getting shut out of some of these awards because, again, he was nominated for Album of the Year for Un Verano Sin Ti, and you know what? That album should have a better chance than it.
Yeah, and it does.
Exactly. Like I think Bad Bunny. Like again, I don't really love Moscow Mule, but like, there's other songs I like more on that album. But again, like I feel like he should be more credible outside of the Latin categories, and the Grammy voting commission will screw him over.
Best pop duo and group performance.
None of this is good.
No, it's not.
Give it to ABBA and walk away because I don't want to hear. Because as much as I will tolerate My Universe, I don't want to hear anything else in this group.
Best rock song. Give it to Turnstile.
Yeah,
I'm all for it.
Honestly,
I saw Turnstile this year in a hardcore venue with stage diving and with mosh pits, and it was glorious.
See, here's the thing with this one. Turnstile is such the obvious choice as a fresh face in rock with a really fresh sound, especially coming out of hardcore, and hardcore never gets nominated for any of this. Like, it would be such a cool pick. And honestly, I like most of the other songs here. Broken Horses by Brandi Carlile is a great song.
Agent Number 9 is doing a good song.
Harmonia, but Harmonia's Dream by War on Drugs, also a great song. Black Summer shouldn't be nominated at all because neither of those Chili Peppers albums were worth a damn.
No.
Now, great. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I think Blackout should win, but I'm terrified that it won't. Going to Best Rock Album, I'm thrilled the Chili Peppers were not even nominated.
Thank you.
Yeah. But honestly, like, the Black Keys are here because they're the Black Keys and they're connected. Elvis Costello.
Watch the world implode and Machine Gun Kelly win.
He's not. He won't. He's not well connected enough to get in there. Honestly, they probably give it to Ozzy, given that Ozzy's health conditions have been an issue. My personal preference would give it to Spoon. That'd be awesome. It won't happen, but it would be awesome if it did.
And the Idols, even though it's like hardcore, like Pong, it's like not the best Idols album.
No, not even close. Crawler, I think, is very. Crawler is not very good. I tried to stick up for it like back in 2021. I wasn't impressed. Like, so it happens.
And we'll end with a laugh. Best metal performance.
Okay. Again, I don't think Turnstile should have been nominated for. Are we sure that Blackout was nominated for both rock and metal performance?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Again, Blackout is such the obvious answer that it's hard for me to look at any of the rest of these. I can see the argument for Ghost. I question it a little bit because, again, it's not Ghost at their best, but there will be enough people who think that it will. Muse is. Oh, I was speaking of disappointments this year. That Muse album was a disaster.
If you thought what was their last album before the
Simulation Theory?
Simulation Theory was a disappointment. Kill or Be Killed.
No. This is where I will also highlight that there should be a metal album that gets nominated here, and it would lead to some of the crustiest arguments possible, but they would be deeply funny.
Yeah, it would be deeply funny.
Megadeth is here on Legacy. Same with Ozzy. Arguably, so is Muse. I think this is a two-horse race between Turnstile and Ghost. I think Turnstile should win. Ghost probably will win.
Ghost Turnstile is also nominated for Best Rock Performance. I didn't copy and paste that one here.
Yeah. Again, it's a toss-up. I think it's close. Again, I don't think Turnstile should be in the metal performance category. They're hardcore punk.
Yeah,
that's not a metal song. Sorry, it's not.
Yep. But it is what it is at this point. Mm-hmm. And then we have nothing upcoming for 2023. Like, literally. Like, I looked at the list.
It's limited. Okay, so Måneskin's finally dropping Rush. I'm not optimistic. I think the moment's kind of passed. And that's my worry with that. Smashing Pumpkins, also the moment was passed 20 years ago.
Yep.
Sam Smith with Gloria, I'm worried about that. I think they're pushing Sam Smith in a direction where they're not quite equipped for everything they're asking him to do. That worries me a lot. Everyone is over their skis about this Paramore album that's coming, and again, I'm not a huge Paramore fan. I've been on the record about that for years. I am deeply concerned whether or not that's going to be, especially following what they put out back in 2017. Yeah, it was 2017. Wow, they've been away for a while.
Yeah.
I think the album is going to get wildly overhyped, and I hope it lives up to it. I genuinely hope it lives up to the hype.
And then, of course, obviously all the memes, Metallica.
You know what? That Metallica comeback single was really good.
It was. I agree.
And you know what? If Metallica comes back with a great album, fine. Like, it's not like, I'm not a huge thrash fan either. So if Metallica's good, it's generally good for rock in general. I'd like for more fresh faces in metal to get the platform that Metallica is going to get by birthright. But at the same time, like, if 72 Seasons is at a good length and doesn't feel as bloated as Hardwired was, I'd be okay with that.
Oh my God, Hardwired was so bloated, but some of the songs are pretty good. Some of the songs were pretty good on Hardwired.
Oh yeah, Hardwired was fine. It was good. It was a late period Metallica album. It wasn't produced like ass like Death Magnetic was, or Saint Anger, or Load or Reload. There are so many badly produced Metallica albums. That's a different conversation.
Yeah,
but I
have
hope
that conversation on a different day.
Yeah, I hope the album is good. I have every reason to think that Metallica could be interesting. Like, they're not so far down the insane rabbit hole as Megadeth was. Speaking of another album that I did not cover this year and have no interest in.
No, please don't.
Yeah.
I heard one track over that and I'm like, what the hell?
Well, the thing with Megadeth is that they are now firmly in a niche, and as much as I've always held they are the worst of the big four by a considerable margin.
They are.
At this point, I'm just not interested. Like, I have nothing to say about them that's all that interesting about, especially when it comes to the content. I'm a content guy, and Megadeth is not something that engages me there. I'd rather listen to Anthrax.
Yeah, Anthrax is great. I've seen them, so
they're fun. Again, as someone who's not huge into thrash, Anthrax at least kind of gets the fact that metal can be kind of goofy, and they run with that. That's fun.
Yes. So, plugs for you on what's upcoming on your channel and what's upcoming for you in the next weeks, months. And
well, I have about 8 albums I'm trying to review before the end of the year. Yeah, wow. 8, which is more than I should. Let's be very honest there. But at the same time, I can probably get through the majority of them. Then it's coming up into year-end list season for me. So I talk about the worst hit songs of the year, the best hit songs of the year, the best songs, and the best albums. So those lists are going to be dropping around from Christmas to New Year's, maybe a little bit after New Year's if the albums list takes a while. Given I'm making a top 50 there, it probably will. But beyond that, if you want to be able to find me anywhere else, you can go to my YouTube channel, Spectrum Pulse, or my subsidiary channel on Billboard Breakdown. If you want to help support the channel or in any particular way, I've got merch and I've got stuff like that. But I also have something called on my Patreon, where if you want access to get albums on my schedule for the upcoming year, or hell, just want to find a way to argue with me on Discord, the method is available.
The method is available to argue with Mark on Discord.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for you, you have a lot of people who argue with you on Discord.
No, actually, not that often. The conversation there is actually relatively simple. It's a good community.
Oh, great. Yep. So I was just making a joke about that.
Yeah.
Because we know how discourse has gotten over the last few months.
Well, but, let's avoid that.
Yeah, let's avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
But Mark, as always, thank you for joining me on this edition of Hard and Heavy. Back to the normal programming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.